Well, this was the first time I ever lived away from home.
Okay.
You know, I was from Atlanta. I lived at home when I was at Merrill. So this is the first time I had left home. It took me a good 2-3 months, you know, to really figure out how I was gonna live. I got an early Afro because I found out, first of all, a haircut costs more money than I needed. I had $10 a week to live off of. I didn't need a haircut. I didn't need dry cleaning. I had suits, so I didn't wear suits except on very rare occasions. One of which was when I found out that Martin Luther King had been killed. It took me that long. And at Christmas, I knew I wasn't going home. There were some people that were able to fly home on Christmas. My Christmas gift was a phone call. And I heard my dad in the background, "Hurry up, Fanny, it's costing a lot of money." But by the beginning of the second semester, I was at home. And then the ball season started in Hey. I didn't have any money, but there were young ladies in IES program who did not want to go to the ball by themselves. They knew I loved dancing. And so we worked out an arrangement. I went to 2 or 3 balls with 2 ladies each time. I danced all night. And I learned how to do the Viennese waltz. But it was home. I was comfortable. And I'm glad I stayed until the spring because I found out the relationship between architecture and light. Baroque architecture in the winter is heavy and depressing. And you feel like the weight of the world. But spring, when light, and Baroque architecture feels like, you know, it's lifting you toward heaven. It was a great place to be in the spring. I learned that in a year. And the spring semester was so different. I mean, we had the fall break, spring break in February. I would have never been able to experience that. I would never been able to go to Turkey and Greece on a really slim budget, and riding in 4th class on the train, and drinking wine out of goat skins with folks I'd never met, and being able to stand the smell of fresh goat cheese. You ought to try it. But that happened all in the second semester, and I felt like Vienna was home by then.
Programs that are specialized, for example, engineering and specific subjects, maybe that would be a path to get people to stay longer. You know, if they could do the things that they're already studying, but in another context, in another language. That sounds really very enticing. Maybe, you know, promoting that aspect would get people to stay a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, if I, just as Ed was saying, I can't imagine what my experience would have been if I had not stayed the full year. Because, you know, to piggyback off of what he was saying, I mean, it took a good 3 or 4 months just to get acclimated to the culture, to the host family I was living with, to my fellow students. And for me, I was also in the only student of my 30-student cohort who did not previously have college-level Japanese. So I was actually also playing catch-up with my cohort mates. And so I feel that if I had stayed a semester, and I say all this to say, any time abroad is of value. So that should go without saying. Any time abroad is of value. But I do think that there's something to be said for that year abroad, and the value of a full year abroad. I'm not sure where, it seemed things started changing, I think in the mid-90s or so, and I'm not sure if the impetus came from our institutions and faculty pushing back against full year study abroad, or if it was coming from students and their own fear of missing out concerns and things like that, or if it was a little bit of both. But we certainly obviously all saw the change happen somewhere in the mid-90s. But up until that point, it was actually the norm that you were committing to that full year abroad, as you probably remember. And so I think that it was really that second semester, that was my sweet spot. That was where the richness of the experience really took hold. And so I don't know if it's, when you're talking about incentives, is it that we can offer larger scholarships to entice students to really think about, to really consider staying that full year. But I think also from a marketing perspective, we have to think about messaging. How are we messaging about study abroad and the value of the full year, in addition to those who may only be able to stay a semester, and that's fine. But what messaging do we have about the value of a full year? Because I haven't really heard a lot of that. So maybe if we can add that to what we're talking about when we talk about study abroad, that too would help in addition to perhaps some financial incentives.